Hi, friend. Welcome to my little corner. Having trouble falling asleep tonight? That's okay. I'm right here with you. Let's pass these quiet hours with some gentle stories, all true tales from real people across the globe. If these stories bring you comfort, I'd love if you'd like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected. Now then, shall we get started?
In the gentle warmth of May 2011, we meet 26-year-old Michelle. Michelle lived with her parents, her brother Michael, and her cousin Christine, surrounded by 15 other cousins and numerous aunts and uncles, in a home that was always filled with conversation and laughter. Her cousin would later share home videos noting, "Here we are in Santa Barbara Beach. We're having lots of fun, and here's my brother." Michelle had patiently waited 5 years to be accepted into her nursing program at Samuel Merritt University, following in the footsteps of her mother, who had been a nurse before her. When her mother sadly passed away, Michelle became determined to finish what she started to make her mother proud. Her brother Michael later shared how Michelle had stepped into a maternal role after their loss, teaching family members to drive to cook, taking them shopping, and always being available with thoughtful advice. By the spring of 2011, Michelle was just 6 months away from completing her accelerated 1-year nursing program, earning straight A's throughout her studies. She was completing a clinical rotation at Kaiser Permanente Hayward Medical Center in the maternity ward. Those who knew her described Michelle as selfless, always smiling, hardworking, and maintaining a positive outlook, regardless of circumstances. Friday, May 20th, 2011, began as an ordinary day, though there was a notable atmosphere of excitement, as it was the students' final day at the hospital. Before a well-deserved break, Michelle had even made weekend plans to visit friends in Reno. The day progressed normally through her rotation shift until approximately 6:55 in the evening, when Michelle informed her supervisor that she needed to retrieve something from her car. She mentioned it would only take a few minutes. Security footage later showed Michelle entering the third-floor parking lot, walking toward her white Honda SUV parked in a corner space. She paused briefly, then changed direction. 17 minutes after she had left the floor, her car was seen speeding out of the building. As the evening shift was concluding around 9:30 p.m., Michelle's supervisor gathered the students together for final instructions, but Michelle was noticeably absent. Her personal belongings remained in the staff room. More concerning was the fact that she hadn't signed out, and calls to her phone went unanswered. Growing worried, her instructor asked security to accompany her to the parking area where Michelle typically parked. While they were there, Michelle's white Honda returned to the building, ascending to the third floor. Her instructor began waving to get the driver's attention. The vehicle briefly stopped before reversing, driving past them and exiting the building once more. The instructor, increasingly alarmed and doubtful that Michelle had been driving, contacted the police. By the following morning, approximately 15 of Michelle's friends and colleagues had gathered at the police station, emphasizing how uncharacteristic this behavior was for her. The group was resolute. Something was wrong, and they wouldn't leave until an investigation was initiated. Officers understood their concerns, and detectives promptly began their work at the hospital parking structure. Meanwhile, Michelle's ex-boyfriend, with whom she remained on friendly terms, began contacting her family members to inform them of the situation. At the parking lot investigators discovered blood on the ground where Michelle's Honda had been parked. At approximately 9:30 a.m., they located her vehicle. It was locked and neatly parked in a visitor's bay outside an apartment complex, just half a mile from the hospital. Inside were Michelle's laptop and, curiously, an identification card for Samuel Merritt University that belonged to someone Michelle had no connection with. This ID had been reported stolen several days before her disappearance. The investigators believed they could rule out a random attack by a stranger. The evidence suggested someone who knew Michelle's schedule had stolen an ID to gain entry to the facility and potentially lured her outside before taking her car with Michelle inside. The scenario of someone randomly waiting in a parking structure for an opportunity to attack or abduct someone did not align with the circumstances they were observing. Hospital records revealed another peculiar detail. 30 minutes after Michelle had walked to her car, the emergency department received a call from someone identifying themselves as Michelle. The caller had asked to speak with her instructor, but had reached the wrong department. When this wasn't possible, the woman requested that a message be relayed, saying her father had experienced a heart attack. As investigators began towing Michelle's vehicle away for forensic analysis, her brother Michael received a text message from his sister's phone, simply stating, "I'm fine." This was followed by another message, "I'm not missing. My phone has been acting crazy. It deleted everything. All these texts have killed my battery." Soon, all of Michelle's friends began receiving various messages, each containing a different explanation for her absence. From having a flat tire to being back in Reno, needing a social media break, feeling unwell, and wanting to rest. When her ex-boyfriend, aware of the sudden activity on her phone, texted her, the response was notably strange. "Who is this?" By May 31st, a reward of $25,000 had been established for information regarding Michelle's whereabouts. Within days, this amount increased to almost $50,000. The La family also engaged a private investigator to assist in the search. More than 100 volunteers formed 14 search teams covering extensive areas around Hayward. The reward continued to increase day by day, eventually reaching $100,000. As the investigation progressed, one name began to surface repeatedly: Giselle Esteban, a former friend of Michelle's. Michelle and Giselle had once been close, even moving together to attend college. Giselle had previously been in a relationship with a man named Scott, with whom she shared a 6-year-old daughter. Their relationship had ended somewhat contentiously, which appeared to be the beginning of difficulties between Michelle and Giselle. Before Giselle and Scott became a couple, Michelle and Scott had briefly dated, though both quickly realized their connection was purely platonic. Despite the clear timeline of events, Giselle had developed a fixation on what she perceived as an ongoing relationship between them. As Giselle's behavior began to change, her friendship with Michelle deteriorated. Michelle maintained her friendship with Scott, unwilling to end their platonic relationship based on Giselle's unfounded suspicions. Michelle had been dating someone else for some time, and Scott was simply living his life separately from Giselle. The narrative Giselle had constructed was demonstrably untrue. Detectives interviewed 27-year-old Giselle, who made no attempt to hide her animosity toward Michelle when asked about their relationship. Giselle stated, "I called her 1 week now to tell her to stay away from my daughter and talking to friends and such. When investigators noted that they understood the relationship had been tumultuous, Giselle replied, "She was my best friend who left with my men." Then he answered. The investigators subsequently spoke with Scott, who appeared genuinely distressed by Michelle's disappearance. He had actively participated in the search efforts, organized by her family and friends. Scott provided details about his troubled history with Giselle, explaining how she had harassed not only him, but his family as well. During a difficult period, Giselle had moved back to live with her family, taking their daughter with her. Scott described his occasional attempts to reconcile for their daughter's well-being. Though these efforts were consistently unsuccessful, Scott shared multiple concerning messages he had received from Giselle regarding Michelle. In one, she had written, "I hope you find what you're looking for in someone as disgusting as her." Another read, "It's the only thing that will convince me you are trying to be better. Otherwise, be prepared to be held accountable for your bad actions and decisions." A particularly troubling message stated, "Michelle has dug her own grave by being a homewrecker and whore. She won't be an issue for much longer." And another, "You push me into insanity with you putting whore before your own family. You should have loved her, and I more, but you loved sex and attention more. Those two are exactly what you are going to get now. You reap what you sow." The messages continued in the same vein, and you can't protect anyone. Your whore will get what she deserves too. FYI, she won't pass her midterms. Giselle had also sent direct messages to Michelle including, "If you were really anybody's friend, mine or Scott's, you would just fuck off and leave my family alone. But all you are is the whore who had nothing better to do and followed me to SF. That's all you will ever be. The whore who slept with other people's men and brothers because no one wanted you. You aren't my friend. You are always just a parasite." Scott then revealed something he hadn't previously shared. A recording of one of Giselle's troubling outbursts while their daughter was in the back seat of their car. In the recording, Giselle could be heard saying, "I asked, can we just be honest about Michelle? Because she's the one issue that I really am having a hard time dealing with." "That's not what you said?" "Yes." "Okay, starting from now, we are going to be honest about Michelle. Do you understand me? Whether you sleep with her, whether you share food with her, whether you talk to her, you will be honest with me. Look at me. You will be honest with me regarding her. Otherwise, I will take your life and hers, and you can take that to the grave with you." Why? Why? Because you lie about her so many times. It's hard to believe that you can sleep with her and lock her up. You deserve to die for your lies, as do she. And you will. If you do it again, this is your last. Why do you understand me? It's your last and final one. Scott explained that Giselle had been briefly admitted to mental health facilities receiving diagnoses of manic depression and bipolar disorder. Her behavior had become increasingly erratic, appearing unannounced at his mother's home where he lived, sometimes entering without permission and waiting silently to be discovered. Scott eventually obtained full custody of their daughter, which further angered Giselle and prompted her return to Hayward to be closer to them. Just 3 days before Michelle's disappearance, a judge had issued a restraining order against Giselle, prohibiting her from coming within 100 feet of Scott or his immediate family. As the first week following Michelle's disappearance, concluded without any sign of her, a local news report captured the growing concern. Almost a week has passed, and still no sign of Michelle lay a 26-year-old California nurse who seems to have vanished after going to her car at a hospital, the car later found on this street. The search now by leaflet, "I just wanted home." Meanwhile, police in Hayward, California are talking to police in Fairfield about an unsolved murder last year of Nurse Fong Lee. The reporter noted similarities between the cases. They have the same last name, that they are both nursing students, that they both disappeared mysteriously. But in Fairfield, the car was unlocked. In our case, the vehicle was secured. It was locked up, as if the last person to drive that vehicle wanted to make sure that the interior was protected. The news segment concluded with a poignant statement from Michelle's brother. "She always calls me that it's a Mother's Day, and I should call my grandma now a reward for information about missing Michelle, with word going out, one poster at a time." Hayward police stated they wanted to remain hopeful that Michelle might still be alive, but the evidence was increasingly concerning when testing of her vehicle revealed traces of Michelle's blood. Investigators informed the Lee family that they were now treating the case as a homicide rather than a missing person investigation. Due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, they couldn't disclose all the details of what they had found in the car. Michelle's family, understandably frustrated by the limited information, resolved to continue their search efforts in hopes of bringing her home safely. With Giselle's name continuing to surface, police requested a more formal interview. Now, several months pregnant with her second child, Giselle acknowledged being at the hospital on the evening Michelle disappeared, claiming she had been there for a prenatal appointment. During the interview, an officer advised her, "Keep a pressure down, otherwise you're going to lose this baby." After this interview, though she was not detained, police placed her under surveillance and attached a tracking device to her vehicle. They strongly suspected her involvement in Michelle's disappearance, but were uncertain whether she had acted alone, particularly given her petite 5'2" frame and pregnant condition. A news report from this period stated, "Police investigating the disappearance of a California nursing student now have a person of interest. They tell us authorities are focusing on a former friend, Giselle Esteban." According to witnesses who lived near Esteban, police were at her apartment in recent days with a crime lab team to go over her car. Everything from that to the trash. We're told from neighbors so far, no charges against Esteban. And she's told local media she had nothing to do with Michelle Lee's disappearance. The investigation took a significant turn when Scott contacted police reporting that he believed he had found Michelle's phone in the back seat of his own car. Data from the tracker on Giselle's vehicle showed she had made multiple trips down Scott Street, frequently parking outside his residence, suggesting she had planted the phone there. Meanwhile, the security team at Samuel Merritt University had been analyzing records to determine where the stolen identification card found in Michelle's car had been used. They discovered that on May 26th, just a day before Michelle's disappearance, the card had been used at various locations throughout the building. Security footage revealed that Giselle, pretending to be a prospective student, had obtained the card and then explored the facility, trying several locked doors and entering a classroom. Later that same day, after most people had departed, Giselle returned through a rear exit wearing a white lab coat. She was observed examining computers and files in the same classroom, eventually accessing the instructor's desk where student schedules, including Michelle's, were kept. After approximately 90 minutes, Giselle departed, now presumably aware of when Michelle would be at the hospital the following day and when she would take her break. Cellular data analysis provided further evidence. Both Giselle's and Michelle's phones had been in the same location after Michelle's disappearance. The day after Michelle went missing, Giselle visited an Apple store requesting assistance to unlock an iPhone, claiming her daughter had accidentally locked the device. After the technician successfully unlocked it, Giselle took the phone to a Chuck E. Cheese restaurant, coinciding with when Michelle's friends began receiving the unusual messages. Cell tower data confirmed this was Michelle's iPhone, and security cameras at Chuck E. Cheese captured images of Giselle sending texts. Though Michelle had not been found, investigators determined they had gathered sufficient evidence for an arrest. On September 7, 2011, 27-year-old Giselle Esteban was taken into custody at her home and charged with first-degree murder. A pair of shoes near her door contained traces of Michelle's blood on the soles. A strand of hair recovered from Michelle's car matched Giselle's DNA, which was also found on the vehicle's steering wheel. A news report covering the arrest stated, "Police in Northern California have arrested a high school friend of a nursing student missing for more than 3 months. Jail records indicate that Giselle Esteban is being held on suspicion of murder." Despite the arrest, Michelle's family remained focused on finding her. Her cousin stated, "Our primary concern is and will always be to find Michelle and bring her home with us. At this point, she is still missing, and we will fight to bring her home every day until we have her with our family again." A police spokesperson added, "The reality is we don't have Michelle. That's a piece we're not going to close out on until we find her, until her location is known." Analysis of Giselle's computer revealed troubling search history in the days leading up to Michelle's disappearance. Queries about inducing heart attacks without leaving evidence following someone without detection. Breaking locks and highly toxic substances, including potassium, chloride, and carbon monoxide. Following Michelle's disappearance, Giselle had searched Michelle's name over 300 times. On September 17th, 10 days after Giselle's arrest, and nearly 4 months after Michelle vanished, search teams located human remains in a shallow grave in a remote, rugged area approximately 12 miles from Giselle's residence. The remains were confirmed to be those of Michelle Ledoux, to the condition of the remains which were skeletal. A precise cause of death could not be determined. In September 2012, after initially pleading not guilty, Giselle Esteban stood trial. She now admitted to causing Michelle's death, but claimed it was accidental. A heat of the frontman confrontation provoked by Michelle. Her attorney argued this constituted voluntary manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. Giselle did not testify in her own defense and displayed no visible emotion throughout the proceedings, sitting and staring blankly with no apparent care or remorse, though certain details remained unclear, specifically how Giselle had encountered Michelle in the parking structure. Prosecutors theorized that Giselle had approached Michelle unexpectedly and attacked her with a sharp object, explaining the blood evidence and how she might have transferred Michelle to the vehicle. The district attorney characterized Giselle as a sociopath, stating, "She's laughing as she is talking about killing people. This is a planned assault, a strategic assault on someone who never saw it coming." Giselle was found guilty of first-degree murder. Consistent with her demeanor throughout the trial, she showed no reaction to the verdict and left the courtroom silently. She later remarked that had she been on the jury, she likely would have convicted herself as well. The presiding judge commented that he had never encountered a case with more condemning evidence in his career. A news report captured the sentencing: two local families torn apart by a murder sparked by a jealous rage. Today, a judge sentenced Giselle Esteban to 25 years to life in prison for killing nursing student Michelle Lake. Giselle Esteban never apologized for killing San Diego nursing student Michelle, lay convicted in October for her murder. Today, an Alameda judge says she never showed a hint of remorse. Michelle's uncle commented on Giselle's lack of remorse. He made a really great observation. And we always felt, sitting in trial, that she felt no remorse, just stared directly at our family with a blank stare. He also expressed disappointment with the sentence. We might have to go back up there, and who knows when. Anytime she's up for a parole hearing, then it all comes up again in court. During the proceedings, Michelle's brother Michael became emotional as he spoke about his sister's aspirations to follow their late mother's path into nursing. The report noted, Lay's brother is now hoping his sister will be remembered many years from now in 2029, when her killer could be up for parole. We just want them to know, after 25 years, to know how unique this case was and to give a face to Michelle's case. The reporter added, at this point, it's up to the Department of Corrections if Esteban will in fact be paroled. The judge says in order for that to happen, Esteban would have to develop a serious sense of remorse. Giselle later gave birth to a baby boy who was placed in his father's custody. Though rumors circulated that Scott might be the father, he denied this, and the father's identity has not been publicly disclosed. Michelle's cousin, Christine, reflected, by committing the crime that she did, she only revealed her own ugliness and revealed Michelle's beauty. It was a case driven by jealousy, obsession, and an all-consuming hatred directed at two people who had done nothing wrong. The Lee family continued their commitment to volunteering for missing persons cases and raising awareness for others in similar situations. Michael shared that he finds comfort in believing his sister is now with their mother and that someday he will see them both again. This thought makes everything a little less sad and frightening for him. Michelle's father recalled that when Michelle first went missing, he spent Father's Day searching for her. He expressed that while he had always been proud of how hard she worked and how busy her life had been, he had never asked his daughter to spend a Father's Day with him. He wished he could turn back time and ask her for just one.
On a peaceful evening in Chatswood, Australia, as the soft glow of sunset painted the sky on April the 27th, 2010, residents were settling into their evening routines. The streets were calm, with only the occasional sound of cars returning home breaking the silence. Around 6:30 p.m., this tranquility was gently interrupted by sounds that would later become significant in a tragedy that touched the community deeply. A couple walking their dog along Holland Street noticed something unusual. A man in a green hooded jacket carrying a backpack, moving quickly away from a house. As they approached the property, they discovered Michelle Beets on her veranda. She had suffered severe injuries, and despite the immediate concern of those who found her, nothing could be done to help her. Michelle Beets had passed away at her own doorstep. Michelle had just returned home from her work at the Royal North Shore Hospital. Born in New Zealand, she had attended Epsom Girls Grammar School in Auckland and had previously worked in the heart department at Green Lane Hospital. Since relocating to Sydney, she had dedicated 25 years to the emergency department at Royal North Shore Hospital, with her last decade spent as a nurse unit manager. Healthcare is known for its demanding nature, long hours and considerable workloads. Yet Michelle approached her responsibilities with calm determination. Those who knew her described her as quiet and reserved, though she maintained clear boundaries. She was well respected among her colleagues, which made the news of her passing particularly difficult to process. The question naturally arose: who would want to harm someone so dedicated to helping others? Initial thoughts turned to a possible interruption of a burglary, but this theory was soon dismissed. The electricity to her house had been deliberately cut at a junction box by the front door, disabling both the outdoor sensor light and the alarm systems. There were also signs that her shed door had been tampered with. The evidence suggested a planned encounter rather than a random act. As police began their careful investigation, they found more than 20 markers leading away from the property along the footpath toward Johnson Street, potentially indicating the path taken by the person who had been at the scene. The community was understandably concerned. Chatswood was known as a safe neighborhood with low crime rates. Michelle's day had been unremarkable. She had gone to work, stopped for groceries on her way home, and was planning to have dinner with her partner David and an old friend named Franz, who was visiting from New Zealand for a dragon boat racing competition. David was quickly eliminated as a person of interest in the investigation. For her colleagues at the hospital, the loss was profound. New South Wales Health described her as a valued and esteemed colleague, friend, and mentor. She was an exemplary nurse, a dear friend and teammate. We are devastated by her loss. Dr. Robert Day, the deputy director of the emergency department where she worked, expressed that the department had lost a friend and leader. The police began looking into Michelle's background, including her work relationships. There had been an incident where Michelle had reported drugs being stolen from the hospital, resulting in a staff member being dismissed. This led investigators to consider whether a former colleague might harbor resentment. Superintendent Terrence Dalton addressed some misconceptions about the investigation, stating, "That is not correct. It's an ongoing homicide investigation. Police are looking into the victimology of the victim, which includes looking into her complete background, everything about her. A number of her work colleagues have been interviewed thus far. Statements have been taken. Her family have been spoken to, and the police will continue along those lines of inquiry." In conversations with those who knew Michelle, one name emerged with concerning frequency. Michelle had apparently mentioned to colleagues that a man named Walter Marsh was beginning to make her uncomfortable. Walter Marsh, aged 48, was a former U.S. Marine who had worked at the Royal North Shore Hospital alongside Michelle. He had arrived in Sydney in February of the previous year on a 12-month contract with the hospital. While he initially claimed that he had only seen Michelle occasionally during his employment, and that they had not had any disagreements, further investigation suggested otherwise. It appeared that his contract had not been renewed in early 2010, and he believed Michelle had provided negative references that prevented him from securing further employment. This situation was particularly significant for Walter, as he needed employment to remain in Australia, reportedly wishing to avoid returning to the United States, where he faced substantial child support obligations. In a curious turn of events, Walter returned to the hospital as a patient just days after Michelle's passing, having suffered a seizure. This placed him in the care of colleagues who were aware of his potential connection to the investigation, though his name had not been publicly released at that point. Despite the growing attention, Walter maintained his innocence when speaking with the media, who obscured his face in their coverage. "Did you kill Michelle Beets?" he was asked. "No," he replied. I liked Michelle and I enjoyed the people I worked with. I enjoyed the eclectic mix of personalities and thought we all got along wonderfully. He suggested that he was being considered due to his nationality, saying he thought he was being targeted because he was not Australian. He emphasized, "I'm not a killer, and I certainly would never harm a woman." The police think that just because I have a military background that I am a killer. I'm not. Walter explained that Michelle had been the one to interview him over the phone when he was in America for the position and had sponsored his visa. He acknowledged that his contract wasn't renewed, but claimed this hadn't affected his visa status and that he held no ill feelings toward Michelle. Police searched Walter's apartment over 3 days, hoping to find evidence relevant to their investigation. Walter stated that on the evening of Michelle's passing, he had met his wife at a nearby train station around 7 p.m. after she finished work, and they had gone home together. When questioned about surveillance footage showing him disposing of a backpack in a bin at a local shopping center, he responded, "I was always going to throw away that bag. It's no big deal." Despite efforts to recover the backpack, searches through various waste sites were unsuccessful. The police had spoken with Walter twice, but initially lacked sufficient evidence to proceed with charges. However, as the investigation continued, they developed new information. During a third interview at the police station, Walter was asked, "Did you know where she lived?" To which he responded, No. When asked if he had been anywhere else, he said no, and denied having tried to use a knife. In this police interview, Walter expressed shock about Michelle's passing, saying, "I was horrified. It was terrible to something that did that." When directly asked, "Did you murder Michelle Beets?" he responded with a simple, "No." The conversation with Walter's wife proved pivotal to the case. She revealed that on the night of the incident, approximately half an hour after it occurred, he had told her, "I did it. It's done. The bitch is gone. No more bad references." She also described how he had demonstrated throat-slitting techniques on her and her brother-in-law, methods he had learned during his military service designed for swift and quiet action. Based on this new information, Walter was arrested at his Lane Cove apartment, and 3 weeks after Michelle's passing, he was charged. Bail was denied. The case progressed to trial with Walter's wife and brother-in-law providing significant testimony. They described how he had practiced knife techniques at home and expressed negative feelings toward his former supervisor. The case was referred to trial in the Supreme Court. Michelle's brother Marty expressed relief at the charges, saying, "Of course, we must now see justice do its course. We just have to let the police do what they do. Let the law do what it does. And it probably won't be long until it goes to court." Michelle's father, Robbie, shared similar sentiments, but also showed compassion for Walter's family, stating, "I feel sorry for Mr. Marsh's wife and for his family in the U.S. I hope the trial will be speedy, correct, and come to a proper end." As the legal process continued, Walter did not enter a plea to the charge of murder. Court documents indicated that Walter's wife and brother-in-law would testify against him, including admissions he allegedly made to his wife about the incident. The judge interpreted Walter's silence as a not guilty plea, advancing the case to trial. Medical evaluations found no evidence of substantial impairment or mental illness. During this period, Walter was hospitalized after being found in his prison cell with self-inflicted injuries to his wrists and throat, along with what was reported as a suicide note. After recovering, his trial proceeded. As the trial unfolded, it emerged that Walter had been planning and observing Michelle for weeks. He had studied her house to understand its security systems and layout, monitored her routine by calling her home phone multiple times daily from payphones to determine when she typically returned, and was even spotted on her street once, explaining why she had told colleagues he was making her uncomfortable. On the day of the incident, Michelle had altered her routine slightly, backing into her driveway rather than driving in forward, bringing her face to face with Walter, who had been waiting with his face covered. He had prepared by having his knife sharpened and had purchased second-hand clothes specifically for that day. According to testimony, he had told Michelle that if she stopped screaming, he wouldn't harm her, but then proceeded to cut her throat using techniques learned in the military. The prosecution argued that Walter had developed significant resentment toward Michelle, believing she had provided negative references that prevented him from finding employment. He had referred to her as a bitch multiple times and expressed that she needed to be gone. Michelle's partner, David Grant, attended the beginning of the trial, which he described as the opportunity for justice. Investigators presented evidence that Walter had cut the power to the house and damaged a back door to create the appearance of a break-in. The couple who discovered Michelle, Carmel, and Gordon Bevan testified about their experience walking on Holland Street when they heard a woman scream followed by slapping sounds. Mr. Bevan described feeling for Michelle's pulse and discovering the wound on her neck. He stated that she turned toward him as if trying to speak, and after making eye contact with him, she passed away. The couple was among approximately 70 witnesses expected to testify. Two key witnesses were Walter's wife, Samantha, and her brother. The jury learned that 3 weeks after the incident, Samantha told police Walter had confessed to her. The court was informed that both Samantha and her brother had received protection from prosecution for concealing a serious offense in exchange for their cooperation. Additionally, Samantha received a visa to remain in Australia and financial support for accommodation. The jury viewed security camera footage showing a man walking around Chatswood in the hour following the incident. Detective Senior Constable Scott Bennett guided the jury through the footage, which began around 6:30 p.m. The man was wearing a white shirt with black bottoms and carrying both a small bag and a plastic bag as he walked west on Victoria Avenue toward the Chatswood Shopping Center. He entered an accessible toilet, then the men's toilet, before proceeding to the food court and disposing of items in rubbish bins. Scott Bennett noted that while Walter's appearance had changed significantly since his arrest, he believed Walter was the man in the footage. The defense argued that the figure in the video might not be their client, noting the place is well lit with people around, and whoever committed that murder would have been covered in blood. The court heard that Walter, who was born in Belfast, had told his wife he had permission to kill from an organization. Samantha testified that about a month before the incident, he had said, "Finally, I got permission from the organization in Ireland to kill Michelle Beets." Samantha also stated that approximately a week before Michelle's passing, her husband had purchased unusual clothes, shoes, and rubber gloves. She saw him wear the outfit once, but never saw those items again. She added that on April 27th of the previous year, her husband told her he had changed in a nearby garage and then disposed of his old clothes, the gloves, and the knife. The court also learned that in the weeks before Michelle's passing, Walter had allegedly been planning another serious action against his ex-wife in the United States. The prosecutor explained that he had flown back to America with intentions regarding his first wife due to $50,000 in unpaid child support. However, he did not follow through with this plan. The prosecutor noted, "It shows some degree of pre-planning. He thought he would solve the problem by murdering his ex-wife. Then it turned to murdering Michelle Beets." In November, the jury reached their verdict: guilty. When the guilty verdict was announced, applause erupted from the public gallery, where Michelle's family and friends were seated. Walter's reaction was described as unusual. He smiled, joked with his lawyer, appeared relaxed, and made a tutting motion toward the victim's family and friends. Michelle's loved ones expressed relief after the long ordeal, with one saying, "I'm personally very relieved with the result today. It's been a long, hard 18 months for myself, Michelle's family and friends. We just want you to know what a beautiful, wonderful person she was, and she is so sadly, sadly missed." Justice Derek Price determined that the maximum penalty was appropriate for what he termed a barbaric crime. In his sentencing remarks, he stated, "The level of the offender's culpability in the commission of the offense is so extreme that the community interest in retribution, punishment, community protection, and deterrence can only be met by a sentence of life imprisonment. The manner in which he killed her was cruel, merciless, and abhorrent. The offender's crime falls within the worst category of murder." A family member expressed relief, saying, "I'm just happy that he's off the streets and, can't cause any more harm to anyone else." I agree with Justice Price that it certainly was in the worst category. During the sentencing, Walter appeared disengaged from the proceedings, ignoring the judge's request to stand for his final sentence, until prompted by his lawyer. While Walter retained the right to appeal the severity of his sentence, David Grant expressed hope that the judgment would prevent any such challenge from succeeding. The conclusion of the case represented not only a resolution for Michelle's family, but also for the police who had worked to bring it to closure. While nothing could restore what was lost, knowing that the person responsible would remain in custody provided some measure of comfort. Journalist Clementine Cuneo shared an unusual experience regarding her interactions with Walter over 2 weeks in March of the previous year. She described forming an uncomfortable bond with Walter as they spoke frequently over the phone while he denied involvement. During one call while she was at a hairdresser, he said he needed to tell her something not particularly good. She recounted, as he spoke, "He began explaining to me that when people are desperate, they do desperate things." He rambled incoherently for a few minutes, but I kept listening, keen to work out what he was on about. "I needed the money," Marsh said. When she realized what he might be suggesting, she asked directly, "Walter, what are you saying to me?" He replied, "I had to do it. I had to do it for the money." Cuneo realized she was hearing what appeared to be a confession. She advised him to contact the police rather than continue the conversation with her. He continued, "I have cancer, so I'm going to die anyway. My wife wants to go back to Vietnam to start a business. The money is for her. It was a contract killing." Feeling uncomfortable with the conversation, Cuneo ended the call and contacted the police. She received 2 more calls from Walter that evening, urging her to meet him. She briefly visited his home the next morning, accompanied by a photographer, unaware that police were already interviewing Walter's wife and brother-in-law. The evidence from these interviews, combined with Walter's call to Cuneo, led to his arrest and charges. 4 years after his conviction, Walter initiated an appeal against his sentence, seeking to reduce it to a minimum of 24 years. His legal team argued that certain evidence regarding his knife training in the Marine Corps should not have been admitted during the trial, stating, "There are no striking similarities between the method Marsh was allegedly taught to inflict and the wounds inflicted upon the deceased." They also contended that the life sentence was excessive, noting there had been no torture before the incident, no sexual motivation, no multiple victims, and Walter had no prior criminal record. Justice Harrison responded that the crime demonstrated significant planning and was clearly a sustained and merciless attack upon an innocent and defenseless victim. He added, "These matters combine to raise the awful specter of future dangerousness to the community." Based on these considerations, the appeal was denied and the original sentence remained in effect. David expressed relief at this outcome when speaking outside the court. In April 2020, Walter Marsh, then 59, was found in his cell at Lithgow Correctional Center at 8:20 a.m. While no immediate cause was provided, it was later reported that he had taken his own life. Michelle's funeral had been attended by more than 1,000 people, a testament to the impact she had made in her community. Following her passing, the Michelle Beats Award for Inspirational Pediatric Care was established to recognize individuals who demonstrate exceptional commitment to advancing children's health in New South Wales. The award description noted that Michelle was deeply committed to nursing practice education and demonstrated the highest standard of nursing professionalism, investing in the best level of care for all patients. Recipients of the Michelle Beats Award received $25,000 worth of medical equipment for their hospital through the Humpty Dumpty Foundation, as well as a $5,000 grant for professional development training or research. Though her time was shortened, Michelle's influence continues. Her legacy endures not only through the award bearing her name, but through the countless lives she touched during her years in healthcare. Every patient she cared for, every colleague she supported, every act of kindness she offered. While the legal process provided a form of resolution, it is her compassion, dedication, and humanity that truly remain as her lasting contribution.
Calgary, Canada, January 2008. The winter snow blanketed the city in a soft white covering as residents went about their daily routines bundled against the cold. Among them was 41-year-old Arcely Laugen, a Filipino immigrant who had made Canada her home 4 years earlier. Arcely had come to Canada with little more than the clothes she wore, leaving behind her husband and 5 beloved sons in the Philippines. Her journey wasn't one of adventure, but of profound dedication. She had made a promise to provide her children with opportunities beyond what was possible in her homeland. The separation was difficult, but her resolve remained unwavering. The transition to life in Calgary had not been simple. The city was vast compared to her hometown. The weather dramatically different, and the absence of her family created a constant, quiet ache. Yet Arcely approached each day with gentle determination. She enrolled in accounting courses and secured 2 jobs, working long hours that often stretched from early morning until late evening. Friends who knew her described Arcely as naturally reserved and soft-spoken. Her life followed a predictable pattern work-study and occasional trips for groceries. She lived simply focusing on her goals rather than personal comforts. Her days were filled with routine. Her evenings often spent alone in quiet reflection or communicating with her family across the ocean. Her solitary routine began to shift, however, when she connected with a group at her local church. A devout Catholic Arcely found both spiritual comfort and community among the congregation. Those who knew her noticed a gradual change, a new confidence emerging as she formed friendships and became more involved in church activities. The quiet woman who had arrived in Canada was slowly coming into her own, finding her voice in this new community. Through these quiet transformations, Arcely never wavered from her purpose. Every decision, every extra shift, every careful saving was directed toward one goal: reuniting with her 5 sons and giving them the opportunities she believed Canada could offer. Her sacrifices were made willingly sustained by dreams of eventually bringing her entire family to join her in this new life she was carefully building. January 17th, 2008, began as countless others had for Arcely. The temperature in Calgary had fallen considerably, and a fresh layer of snow covered the ground. At 10 o'clock that evening, Arcely finished her shift at a downtown printing company approximately 4 miles from her residence. Bundled in a thick coat and dark hat carrying several bags, she began her customary hour-long journey home. Arcely's routine was consistent enough to be almost clockwork. She would finish work at 10, walk to the nearby train station within 10 minutes, and board her train at approximately 20 minutes past the hour. Security cameras at the station confirmed this pattern held true that night. The footage, somewhat obscured by weather conditions and snow on the camera lens, showed Arcely walking along the platform at 9 minutes past 10. The station was relatively empty. Seeking shelter from the wind, she sat in a covered area with a few other passengers, though they did not board the same train as she did. At 10:30, Arcely's train arrived at Franklin Station, the stop nearest to her home. She disembarked and walked briskly toward the exit, likely eager to return to the warmth of her residence and rest before another early start the following day. From the station, she had only a short 5-minute walk remaining to reach her home. What Arcely couldn't have known was that among the sparse crowd at the station, someone had noticed her. A young man wearing a yellow coat who had been on her train began walking quickly behind her. Camera footage would later show him leaning around another passenger, appearing to look at Arcely. The security footage revealed more about this individual's behavior throughout the evening. Earlier, he had been wandering the platforms at around 10 o'clock, walking back and forth before briefly conversing with someone. When a young woman walked past him on the platform, he pulled his hood over his face and turned to watch her. At the stop, before Arcely disembarked, he had exited. The train wandered aimlessly on the platform for a moment, spoken briefly with someone, then quickly reboarded the same train. As Arcely approached the escalator, the young man pulled his hood up and followed just one step behind her. He carried 2 items that would later prove significant to investigators: a construction hard hat and a large blue bag. At approximately 11:30 that night, 90 minutes after Arcely had left work, the emergency services received 2 concerning phone calls in quick succession. The first came from Arcely's friend, Melchior, followed immediately by a call from her roommate, Christine. Both callers shared the same alarming information. Arcely had contacted Melchior in distress. She had been crying, screaming for help, saying that she was being beaten and assaulted. The call was muffled, suggesting the phone was not close to her, and then suddenly disconnected. Neither caller could provide details about Arcely's location. Melchior had immediately gotten into his car to search for her, calling Christine as he drove before they both contacted emergency services. Their concern was palpable, but with so little information about where Arcely might be, the search would prove challenging. The emergency dispatcher immediately sent 2 patrol officers to meet Christine downtown. Another team member began attempting to call Arcely's phone to help locate her position. Christine joined the officers in their vehicle and directed them to Arcely's workplace. Together, they began a methodical search of the surrounding area. For several hours, they examined every parked vehicle, alleyway, and dumpster along potential routes Arcely might have taken. Throughout this time, calls to her phone went unanswered, simply ringing continuously. By 2 in the morning, more than 12 officers had joined the search effort. The temperature continued to drop through the night, adding urgency to their task. Someone injured and unable to call for help would be at significant risk in such conditions. A team visited the printing company where Arceli worked, and staff confirmed she had definitely departed at 10 o'clock, a fact supported by their security footage. Despite these considerable efforts, no trace of Arceli was found. The search continued through the early morning hours, expanding to cover more territory. As concern deepened, the officers checked every possible location where she might have sought shelter or where she might have been taken. But the night revealed nothing. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the nature of the investigation changed dramatically. A person walking to work discovered a body beside a church in an area away from the locations previously searched. While the individual had sustained significant injuries, authorities believed it to be Arceli fingerprint. Comparison would later confirm this identification. The scene was sobering. Arceli was found with her trousers tangled around one ankle, though she was still wearing her coat. Her phone was nearby, appearing to have been deliberately broken. Several other items were collected as potential evidence, including some empty bottles, a construction hard hat, and a large blue bag. The bags she had been carrying and her purse were missing. For Arceli's family, learning that she had been found near a church added a particular layer of sadness. Given her deep religious faith and regular attendance at services, the location seemed a cruel irony. One officer at the scene, also Catholic, later mentioned that he had knelt beside her and offered a prayer, promising to find the person responsible, something he had never done before, nor since. The medical examination revealed that Arceli had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, with injuries so severe that her brain had ceased functioning within minutes. Her skin had separated from her skull due to the force of the impact. The report noted multiple fractures to her facial bones and throat, extensive bruising to her stomach, and evidence of sexual assault. Her eyes had been swollen shut, and her nose, jaw, and cheekbones were broken, along with bones in her throat. The investigators began by speaking with those closest to Arceli Christine Melchor and her other friends and acquaintances. When questioned, they confirmed that beyond her church group and communications with her family in the Philippines, Arceli maintained minimal social connections. Her time was almost exclusively dedicated to work study and church attendance. There was no indication of anyone in her life who might wish her harm. A memorial service was held for Arceli, while her family made arrangements to have her remains returned to the Philippines. More than 400 people filled the church, a testament to the connection she had formed. Despite her relatively short time in Canada and her naturally reserved nature, the security footage from the train stations became a crucial element in reconstructing the events of that evening. One figure in particular drew the attention of investigators, the young man in the yellow coat who had followed Arceli from the platform. Among the items he carried were two that matched objects found near Arceli's body: a construction hard hat and a large blue bag. One detective recognized distinctive stickers and logos on the hard hat as belonging to an iron worker. Following this lead, investigators visited the local ironworkers' headquarters, where a manager reviewed the security images and identified the individual as 21-year-old Christopher Wacherston. When officers arrived at Christopher's residence, they immediately noticed a yellow coat hanging over a chair with what appeared to be bloodstains on the sleeve. A search of the premises yielded Arceli's purse, containing her identification and credit cards. DNA testing later confirmed the presence of Christopher's genetic material on Arceli's body. An analysis of the stains on his jacket identified them as Arceli's blood. Based on this evidence, Christopher Waterston was arrested and charged with the sexual assault and murder of Arceli Leeuwagen. Christopher Waterston entered a plea of not guilty and opted to testify in his own defense. The trial proceeded before a judge without a jury. Under Canadian Criminal Code, if a sexual assault or unlawful confinement is followed by homicide, the charge is first-degree murder. Without such a connection established, the charge would be second-degree murder. While both charges carry a life sentence, the minimum period before parole eligibility differs significantly. 25 years for first-degree murder compared to 10 to 15 years for second-degree murder. The defense strategy centered on creating uncertainty about the sequence of events. They suggested there might have been a separation between the assault and the homicide, potentially creating reasonable doubt against a first-degree murder conviction. The defense attorney argued, not enough is known about the sequence of events, suggesting this created reasonable doubt. The prosecution countered this argument, stating it was implausible that a woman who had just been assaulted would remain at the location. They maintained that the sexual assault and murder constituted a single, continuous event, qualifying it as first-degree murder. As the prosecutor put it, it's not likely a woman who's just been raped would stay there. The sexual assault culminated with the murder as one transaction. This was absolutely first-degree murder at the hands of a truly evil person. During his testimony, Christopher admitted to assaulting and beating Arceli, but claimed he had not intended to cause her death. He described consuming between 12 and 24 beers in Southern Comfort that evening, as well as smoking salvia, resulting in disorientation and hallucinations. He stated that when he saw Arceli, he mistook her for his mother, who had passed away in 2001. When Arceli turned to look at him, he claimed to have been unable to respond and instead began his attack. Christopher testified that Arceli had pleaded with him, telling him she was a mother and wife, but he continued the assault. Christopher described experiencing a dissociative state during the attack as if observing from above, before snapping out of it and telling Arceli to leave. He stated that when she attempted to flee, the moment when she briefly called Melkor, he caught her again and began kicking her head with steel-toed work boots, claiming this was intended to cause amnesia rather than death. The prosecution challenged this account, suggesting Christopher was fabricating explanations as he preceded. Expert testimony regarding the effects of salvia indicated that its influence would have dissipated by the time of the assault based on Christopher's stated timeline, diminishing the intoxication defense. The defense also presented information about Christopher's difficult upbringing, including his mother's murder in Saskatchewan and subsequent struggles with substance use, arguing that these factors had contributed to his mental instability. His lawyer stated, "He fell through the cracks of life. He fell through every crack the system is designed for." His troubled youth is an understatement in terms of his background. The life he led his mother, being murdered behind a hotel in Saskatchewan, and it just unraveled after that. As the trial progressed, local news outlets covered the proceedings. One reporter observed, "Normal, very disturbing details about the final minutes of Arceli Leeuwagen's life were revealed in court today." In an agreed statement of facts read by the prosecution, Christopher James Waterston, who was 21 at the time, followed Leeuwagen onto a secluded pathway and attacked her. His DNA was found on her body, and her blood was found on his clothes. After more than 2 years of legal proceedings, the judge delivered a verdict of guilty On the charge of first-degree murder, Christopher Waterston received a sentence of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 25 years. In court, the now 22-year-old offered a brief apology saying, "I do not know that I will live forever with the sorrow that will always be on my soul." He filed an appeal in 2010, which was unsuccessful. For Arceli's family, the verdict brought a measure of relief, though the pain of their loss remained profound. Oswald Sombrito, Arceli's brother, traveled from Toronto to attend the proceedings, hoping to find some sense of closure. When asked about forgiveness, he responded, "I don't think so. I don't think so. Because what we've been through, I just can't imagine that someone will experience again what we have." He added, "It's still hard, but we were just human. We have to forgive." Marlon Horry, one of Arceli's sisters, attended court each day during the trial, keeping the family informed of developments. She rarely spoke publicly about the case, finding it difficult to process the details revealed during the proceedings. "It's hard to accept the way she was killed," she shared quietly. "I miss my sister. It's not easy. Every single day, you have to try to be normal." The family held on to positive memories of Arceli while continuing to process their grief. They've endured more than 2 years of anguish. But this family is determined to make it through another day, no matter how tough it gets, observed one reporter covering the case. "We're going to live forever with this pain for the rest of our life," Oswald shared. Arceli's 5 sons remained in the Philippines with their father. The family expressed a desire to bring them to Canada, continuing Arceli's dream, but faced challenges with the immigration process. "We tried to finish whatever my sister wanted to do," Marlon explained. "I still believe Canada is one of the best places to live, so that hope is still intact despite tragedy for a family that wants to keep a mother's dream alive." She added, "Oh, she did whatever for the family. She tried to give them everything." The officers involved in the case often reflected on Arceli's story. One detective mentioned that it stayed with him in a way few others had. The patrol officer, who had said a prayer by her body, noted that he drove past that church on almost every shift, his thoughts returning to that snowy January night. A trust fund was established for Arceli's family, with donations from the Calgary community continuing to provide support. As of the last update, her sons had followed their father into engineering careers, but had not yet realized Arceli's hope of relocating to Canada. She was a woman who sacrificed, who worked hard, all for a dream to bring her family to Canada. It was a dream that was shattered the night she died. To date, the family remains in the Philippines. No word yet on when or if they might be given the green light. Noted a follow-up report on the case. Arceli Lawegan's life was defined by sacrifice and determination. She had traveled alone to an unfamiliar country, working tirelessly to create possibilities for those she loved most. Friends remembered her willingness to place herself last if it meant her family could come first. A quiet dedication that continued to touch those who knew her story. Arceli's life was for her family. She had already sacrificed so much to provide the best life for them, and she had no intention of slowing down. Friends said, traveling to another country alone, knowing no one, to work every hour. She showed what a determined and hardworking person she was. She was always happy to put herself last, if it meant her loved ones always came first. The gentle snow continues to fall in Calgary each winter, covering the paths Arceli once walked. While her story remains in the memories of those who knew her and those who worked to bring her case to its conclusion,